So when Thanksgiving came along this year, I thought, hey, this is going to be a really great time to find an immersive RPG to fill up all those spare hours I now have during the holidays. And then break came and went. Christmas came and went. The New Year's celebrations were done and January was over. And here I was still playing the immersive RPG that I decided to pick up, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And honestly, this game really tore my life apart for a moment. I stopped going to the gym, stopped working on game reviews. I was just wandering Bohemia aimlessly, picking up thistles and convincing myself it was totally normal to spend hours hammering away at digital swords and axes as I live on my blacksmithing fantasies. Over that time, this game consumed nearly 250 hours of my life in the past couple months, but now I've finally reached a point where discussing it is something that I really wanted to do with you, and so I'm very excited to share my thoughts on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 with you today. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 pulled me back into its world almost instantly after having played the first title many years ago around the time that it launched. There's really something to the overall presentation, its tone, the pacing, the grounded realism that makes slipping back into Henry's life feel very natural. I felt like the opening hours did a really fantastic job of catching you up on Henry and Sir Hans' journey so far without feeling like a lore dump. It's subtle, it's organic, and really paired with a tutorial that refreshes your memory on the game's systems without ever talking down to the player. And honestly, something I really appreciated was the game has one of the better excuses I've seen for resetting a character's skill levels. My Henry in the first game was maxed out, probably a half dozen areas at least, so I expected some kind of awkward like, oh, you forgot everything kind of trope. And while we do get something kind of like that, instead Henry ends up suffering a serious injury, something that is believable and a grounded reason for reducing his abilities overall. So yeah, I'd have to say that it's so much better than the classic, bonk on the head. Oh, I don't remember anything now. I gotta learn how to reuse my sword from the beginning because I have amnesia kind of approach that so many developers and sequels rely on. And so I really did respect that they were able to find something a bit more natural to pull us back into the world and give us a chance to kind of rebuild our character from the start. And without spoiling anything in particular, the story picks up with Henry navigating the political and personal fallout of the first game, but now with a broader scope and higher stakes. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves discussing the narrative and the story, I just want to talk a bit about some of the ideas that I had rolling around in my mind as I played this game on its gameplay and its overall gameplay structures. So let's first talk about the core structure in the game, which I kind of narrowed down to just living a second life in medieval Bohemia. The core loop of Kingdom Come 2 is still about immersion at its core. You're exploring towns and countrysides, talking to locals, taking on quests and managing gear, and slowly building Henry's skills through actual use of those skills while playing the game. And when these systems really clicked, it genuinely feels like living a second life in a medieval Bohemia. The world is dense with detail and the game trusts you to engage with it at your own pace. But I will say that the first 10 or so hours are really going to be missing a major pillar of the Kingdom Come Deliverance to experience, which is all about combat, and that absence is really felt. So for some weird reason, combat, especially early on, ended up being quite the step back and pretty rough. I don't really honestly know what to say. Henry is so bad at fighting that it borders on absurd. It's pretty insane. Even just 2 swings of a little short sword will have Henry completely gassed and needing to run away from the combat to collect some air and gather back some stamina. And to tailor that off, the most basic bandits can obliterate him with master level defensive combos that you are not even capable of understanding when you first start the game. Now, I understand that Henry is healing, but the imbalance just felt very extreme as soon as you started. And this was something that, yes, is present in the first title, but not to this extent, and it really kind of set me back a little bit when I first started engaging with the combat systems. The game demands flawless execution from you at these points in the title. You gotta have perfect parries, perfect stamina management, and all the while enemies can tank multiple hits and they get better at blocking as they're dying, which I just thought was crazy. And they're chaining these wild combos together and using master strikes against you that completely shred your health. It just honestly wasn't very realistic and not fun at all. And again, this is something that was present in the first game, but not to this extent if I remember it. So for the most part, I would say it's advisable to just stay away from combat until you can afford your first couple pieces of armor and get your first couple of training sessions in with a sword before you begin leveraging those, because you will get totally destroyed and it's going to ruin your experience playing this game. Now, the really weird thing about it is once you have even just the base level of skill, a nice full suit of armor, and the Master Strike ability in particular, all of a sudden every enemy in this game can be just completely annihilated with just a couple swings of your sword. So this kind of flip in overall balance just felt really weird, and so the game is either extremely difficult or incredibly easy. And I just wish that Warhorse Studios worked on creating a more organic progression to the sword fighting in particular. And it's not just about difficulty balance. There's some really weird technical issues going on that I don't remember being present in the first game as well. For example, sometimes Henry just drops out of combat for no reason. You were sitting there and you're aiming at an opponent and you have your sword going, but then suddenly you turn and you look away, and now, oh, Henry's dropped his arms. The enemies are now swinging at you full force as you just stand around and try to, like, you know, reorient Henry so he's back in the fight or something. I have no idea what's going on. But you just lose your lock on randomly. And if you're fighting multiple opponents too, I mean, this becomes a serious issue. If you kill one, you know, it often just kicks you out of combat entirely, and you're like trying to like turn around and re-engage somebody. And the problem with that is that all of a sudden you're open up to strikes without defensive options, parrying, dodging, because the game assumes you're no longer in the combat system, so it doesn't allow you to execute those. And now this is incredibly frustrating because it's no longer a player mistake. It's just the game glitching. I'm fighting an opponent and I've dropped them, and now the game has assumed, oh, well, you killed the opponent, so I guess you're no longer in battle. But little did it know, there's 3 or 4 other opponents around me. And you'll be in fights like this frequently enough that I would have expected Warhorse to have identified that when testing it and said, hey, well, we gotta flesh out how the lock-on systems work, because otherwise players such as me, such as Forrest, will find themselves getting whacked from all angles as soon as the AI realizes you're no longer in the fight for some reason, which I thought was just really strange. I would have hoped at the very least that in a multi-opponent engagement, the game would have had a way of naturally locking onto another enemy once you've taken one down. I think that alone would have been a nice system to implement. And if it is there, I just don't know if it's functioning as well as it should have. And then to beat on the combat a little longer, the strategies available to the player often felt a little uneven. One of the first strategies you're going to learn as an option is parrying and then counterattacking, right? You block their attack and then you attack back. But this often leads to kind of aimless and endless back and forth exchanges that really just end up draining your stamina and damaging your weapon, and further leading to exposure to you getting attacked by the enemy once you've dropped your stamina a little too much. So oftentimes you're going to end up using some form of blocking, either just blocking with a reaction or using a shield, and that way you're protecting your stamina a little better for when you're attacking back at the opponent. But I found that blocking with a shield in particular wasn't fun still, because what's going to happen is you are going to tank so many attacks that it's really going to destroy your stamina, and then lead you to having you know, damage applied against you and not having enough stamina to fight back. So I took the strategy of just saying, hey, well, the best option available to me then is to just use a weapon itself, right? So there's a couple of different types of weapons. There's maces and axes and pole arms and short and long swords and so on. But unfortunately, there's a really cool move you're going to have to use to excel in the combat here, and it's called Master Strike. And basically Master Strike is if you set up your arm on the opposite side that you're expecting the opponent to attack from, in the moment they attack, you can counter right back and hit them first. So let's say they're going to attack you from the right side. If you have your weapon set up on the left side, as soon as they attack, boom, you can do some damage there. Now, unfortunately, it's been restricted to only the use of swords, long and short. So when it comes to excelling in combat, if you wanted to try other weapons, you're gonna find yourself very limited on the options available to you. And so I didn't end up using a lot of the different weapons because of that, unfortunately. And so my experience with the combat really came down to the sword. And it would have been cool if there were a little more flexibility in particularly Master Strike application throughout the course of the game, but unfortunately I just didn't find it myself. So then now we've taken what really could be a robust combat system with many weapons and options available to you and milked it down to just a couple of viable paths, right? blocking's not going to really work too well. Counter and parry's not going to work too well. Master Strike is available to you, but it's only with swords. And so if you did want to use another weapon, well then what avenue do you have? And there really is one that I played around with a little bit, and you can feint and of course dodge as well. And so these become quite reliable options with those other weapons since you don't have Master Strike. But overall, I think the way in which you begin to understand the strategy behind engaging with Kingdom Come Deliverance in its combat, you see how narrow and somehow worse than the first game is. It eats away at a ton of stamina in this title when you're fighting, and it's just something that takes you so much time to build up. But by the time you've unlocked kind of your stamina bar, you're going to have this infinite amount that's going to have you trouncing opponents as you just swing, 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 swing until they are dead. And so that's really kind of where the combat ultimately led me to. Master Strike and swing, 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 swing. And I don't remember Henry being at that level in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 when I played it, and so I really did feel like for some reason the combat seemed to have taken a step back here for me. But enough about combat. It's really just one aspect of this game overall. This game is so robust and the things you can do within its gameplay. So I really just wanted to comment a little bit on the navigation and world design in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. The world itself is so beautiful and thoughtfully constructed. I loved the art style of the maps. You have these intricate, hand-drawn, full of personality visuals that you're given, and really dynamic depending on if you're looking at local maps or world maps. But one thing that did come up is later in the game, navigating into these huge cities and these like maze-like castles does become a bit of a challenge at times. A great example is waypoints for objectives. You're gonna have ones that say, oh, go up or go down. You gotta climb these floors, and they might end up leading you in circles at times. Places like Sukdal, which will become a huge area you'll spend a chunk of story missions in. Later on, we'll see you going up and down and all around this castle as you talk to people and start new quests. And, you know, not always in a good way. I wish there was a little more nuance to the way in which you interact with these waypoints. They're hard to see from the map. They're hard to figure out like exactly where you need to go at times, depending on where you're traveling to. And especially when you spend so much time in Sukdal later on in the game, a little tedious. There was something really nice that I didn't use in Kingdom Come Deliverance, or wasn't in Kingdom Come Deliverance. I don't remember which of those it was, but fast travel. The two major world maps you're going to explore in this game are huge, and fast travel really came in handy. And I think it struck a really nice balance, because fast travel is available mostly at core city centers, and then you have to travel from there to kind of hit your destination. So I really did like that, because it offers you a little bit of a balance, you know, of manually traveling to a destination and also having the convenience of getting there much quicker. So I really did appreciate that. I thought there was a lot of layers to the exploration in the world, and overall just the feel and the world design was very well put together. And you have some avenues for accomplishing that travel. You're going to be able to go by foot or on a horse. And once I got a horse, I felt like the game really began to open up in a satisfying way. Riding feels weighty and believable. The horse has momentum. It doesn't turn on a dime. You know, you can absolutely crash into things and get thrown off, which was surprising and funny under more than one occasion when I discovered that lack of clearance would send you getting launched upside down onto the ground from your horse if you happen to hit your head on an arch, as I did more than one occasion. And so in that way, riding horses is a little wonky, but it's charming. And for the most part, the horse behaved fine. Didn't give me too many troubles. It got plenty of pets along the way as well. But the only thing I didn't really understand is why everyone kept calling my horse cheap. I had incredibly immaculate tack. My horse was kitted. He was bathed. And yet NPCs were still running around for like most of the game, treating him like a half-starved mule. I have no idea what that's about, but the Pebbles hate has to stop. And it really does once you unlock this like Pebbles perk. You can get rid of Pebbles, but do keep Pebbles, because Pebbles turns into an absolute machine if you keep her around. And another secret I'll give to you, the Phantom Horse, and if you play the game or you're gonna play the game, Phantom Horse, you can in fact tame the Phantom Horse and make it your horse. That's what I ended up doing Rest in peace, Pebbles. I really did love Pebbles, but I had to play the game. Soft Mantipore's cool. Also comment on stealth and AI interaction with the stealth systems. That's also a mechanic in the game that's kind of at its core. And stealth is fine, it's not exceptional, it's not really broken. Most of the stealth sections are either so scripted that getting caught kind of feels predetermined if it's going to happen to you, or they're light enough on NPCs that you can really resolve them quickly without having to be concerned about being detected. Now, when threats were there, the AI detection, I will say, felt pretty fair, and the system never really frustrated me the way that combat did. I do wish there was more incentive to kind of leverage this style of play, but I really feel like players will naturally develop the speech and combat skills quickly and find themselves in a situation where those are much easier to use in completing missions before big opportunities present themselves to sneak around. But when I did use more stealth options to resolve missions, I did have a lot of fun with it. So maybe this was just something where systemically I should have been doing more of it so I could engage and have a lot more fun with it. I remember on one mission I broke into a guy's house and I snuck in and I stole a book, and then I hid in a corner. And something in his AI triggered to the fact that, hey, someone had broken into my house, and he came running in and he was looking for the book. And I'm here in the corner like, oh snap, he's gonna see me. And then he runs by, and then I sneak out of the house really quickly. And little moments like that make mechanics such as stealth feel so rewarding to a player. So just wanted to call that out. It's probably somewhere here in my gameplay clips as you're watching the video. And something you're gonna engage with while you're fighting and sneaking and riding your horse around is, in any RPG, inventory and UI systems. You're going to spend a lot of time there. And inventory sorting is a very nice addition in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I don't remember if it was as robust in the first title, but I will say that once you start carrying around a lot of items, where, Henry in my game had almost a 500-pound capacity towards the end, it still feels insane to navigate the inventory. I really do wish there were more just kind of grouping options overall, or smarter categorization. So there's like one that's called Other or Miscellaneous, but this will have these huge lists where you have 8,000 keys and tons of like 800 armor's kits and cobbler's kits and weapon kits, so that you can repair different things. And it'll also have like ingredients in it, dried herbs and things you want to use for alchemy, and other, things you might have stolen, like decorations, silver and gold. And when I thought about that, I was thinking, wow, Other has a lot of different things in it that really could have been better grouped. And it is kind of grouped, but I wish that the grouping, say the keys, I'm never going to look at the keys. Keys are just something you kind of pick up along the way, and then maybe they do or don't open a door you're trying to get through. So why couldn't the keys section have like its top header menu where you could close it, right? So you can close it so you never have to look at it again. That's what I would really like to do, because every time I wanted to scroll through this area, especially if I was looking for a bandage because I was injured, I'd have to go to Other, then have to scroll up or down for at least 15 seconds to get through all this random crap so I could find the bandages. So I really would have liked if there's a little more grouping in the inventory screens. Now, one thing I didn't expect that I thought was super cool was I loved how easy it was to switch between up to 3 different outfits that you've set up for Henry. I ultimately ended up having a sneaking outfit that made me just very quiet visually and non-conspicuous. I had a town exploration outfit where I looked super fancy, my speech was really high when I was wearing it, and then I had a combat outfit where I was fully kitted in armor. And I just liked how the game lets you swap between these so quickly and intuitively. Being able to change outfits mid-trading session, for example, to compare stats on new gear was incredibly convenient. I did run into a few occasions where I was in a situation talking to someone in my fancy town outfit, and I was doing a story mission, and suddenly we're in a combat encounter and I wasn't given the opportunity to change my outfit, and I couldn't go swap my outfit because the combat had already started. So I do wish there was a little bit of levity on how you could use these, but overall it was a very cool addition and something I didn't expect, and I think a lot of RPGs could benefit from doing. Now, something that was present in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 that's here in the second game as well that I really loved was just sort of the more sim stuff, the crafting, the maintenance, the alchemy that you could participate in. Alchemy here is really one of the best and coolest systems in the game, in any kind of RPG game I've played. It's deep, it's tactile, genuinely rewarding when you are collecting herbs, learning recipes, timing your mixtures, crafting the potions in a UI that feels just built specifically for playing this. So whether you need to save or heal, sleep better, it's really not this lazy like combine 3 items and then press X system. It's really kind of fully realized mechanic that feels handcrafted and genuine to the overall world of the game, which is something that I just thought was so cool. The blacksmithing too also falls into this category of being very fun and just really kind of a time sink if you want to get into it. One thing I thought was funny was just how overall the audio could be. You know, Henry begins whistling as he's trying to get his groove down, and he's trying to hammer in a way that will help him time each hit to make it really nice. But I found it more weirdly distracting because even if I was on point pretty much, I'd have to rotate the weapon that I was working on, or maybe I'd take a second, and that would kind of screw up the timing of the whistling, so it'd kind of go in and out. So that was a little funny. Other maintenance systems too, like repairing armor or sharpening pieces of equipment, are also there, and they're pretty cool and fun to engage with as well. Something nice is that there's a couple little perks that incentivize players to sharpen their own swords, mend their own boots, but quests involving more collecting rare smithing recipes or raw materials or something like that would have been really nice. There are a couple here, but I really did enjoy those and wish it was more fleshed out so I could engage with the systems much more. The game gives you a pretty excellent sword, and also you get the opportunity to buy some pretty excellent swords once you hit the Kuttenberg region. So once you have those, the recipes available to you, unless you are really going around to each blacksmith and seeing what they have available, I don't think you're gonna find something as rare and as quality. And so I think eventually you end up forgetting the system exists unless you're pushed to use it. So I wish the developers did push us a little more to use those systems. And just a totally little annoyance, like non-gameplay necessarily baked into it, is that if you want to use the smithy, you got to know what raw materials you're going to use for a weapon. And of course you could go into your inventory and you could go to your recipes, and then you could look at what recipes are available to you. But I often find myself, the most convenient thing is to you know, go to the blacksmith and trigger the mini game, so you can just, menu pops right up there, and then you can look and you can see, oh, okay, I need iron, I need steel, I need this reinforced pommel so I can work on this weapon. But when you back out, because you've engaged with that system, there's a little bit of friction that occurs, because the blacksmith, who is the person who'd be able to sell you those raw materials that you might need, well, unfortunately they enter like this strange animation lock, and you can't trade with them for about half a minute until they've decided they're no longer going to lean against the pole. Instead they're going to go back to blacksmithing, and that's when you can open the dialogue and you trade with them. I just thought it was like a weird thing, because by the time that I can now trade, unless I was really paying attention, I might have forgotten either the quantity or the item that I actually needed. Which means I get into this loop where I now have to go back and have to open the blacksmith mini game so I can kind of look again at the recipe and jot down some notes about exactly what I need. So really just some random little things that make me feel like I'm playing an RPG game that stood out. But I think the one thing to take away from a lot of the notes that I'm sharing here is that there's no like systemic failures in the game, and that's what makes it so excellent overall. A little bit more on the gameplay systems. I want to talk about economy and trading. That's also a big aspect of playing an RPG game. My style is to collect, get as many items as I can until I'm over encumbered. And when I'm over encumbered in most games, I then, you know, fast travel to the closest merchant I can sell all my goods to. In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, you kind of get some leeway because once you're over encumbered, you can still move around. You can't fast travel. So especially early on, I found myself just like, well, I guess I'm just gonna walk for 10 minutes back to town and sell all my goods, because I didn't want to drop even the littlest groschen. I needed to get everything. So I'd say in this way, the economy starts out pretty balanced and even tense in a good way. Early on, you're gonna be forced to make some real decisions about how you're spending money. Do you buy these nicer clothes that will help you with your success on a story mission, or do you save it for better armor? And that early struggle kind of feels really great and has you making hard financial decisions about how exactly you're going to proceed. But once you reach Kuttenberg, I think the whole system begins to evolve, especially the economics of the game kind of just break wide open. High value armor suddenly becomes much more easy to collect and sell. And I think a lot of people are going to be just drowning in money and currency, and it just stops mattering entirely. I like little systems as well, like haggling in the trading is very interesting. So cool concept, but not exactly dynamic. I mean, all I had to do each time that I spoke to a trader was just shave off a few coins from the overall sale, and your skill's gonna increase. And then as your skill increases, all you need to do is just shave off a few more coins. Yes, it works, but it's not really all that deep. And I would have liked to have seen traders find, less interest in such products, since I was almost on an every other day basis flooding the markets in Gutenberg with Milanese armor and bassinets. You'd think by that point there'd really be no demand anymore, and they wouldn't want to either buy my goods or would only want to buy them for way below market value to kind of flatten out the means by which I could get my hands on a ton of money at once. I would have appreciated that because it would have kept me more engaged in the financial decision-making aspects of playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which would have taken the gameplay and the immersion up just an extra notch above what it already is. How about crime and punishment systems and reputation? These are things that are going to be showing up constantly as you're playing the game. The crime and punishment systems are interesting on paper. You're going to learn more about them and their nuances through the loading screens and tooltips than you are by playing the game, because in practice, I really didn't end up interacting with these almost at none, if at all. It's honestly pretty hard in this game to get in trouble, especially badly enough that you get to see the system fully play out. And the game doesn't really give you much incentive to pursue criminal activity anyway, because as I mentioned, it's really easy to get your hands on cash, especially after you've made some progress through the first 20 or 30 hours or so. There's almost always a more cleaner, more legitimate way to make money and complete mission objectives. So the whole outlaw path ends up feeling unnecessary, except if you're really pushing yourself to play the game in such a way that has you interacting with those systems a lot. And there's some survival systems too. Henry has to eat, he has to drink water, he has to stay bathed and looking fresh so he can be the Rizzler and he can really get in there and talk to the people and convince them of his needs. But again, once you have a little bit of money and a few perks in the survival skill tree that are really important to tailoring these down, the entire survival layer, I think, becomes a little more trivial than anything. Bathhouses in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 are super overpowered. They basically reset every aspect of Henry's condition, whether that's his cleanliness, his energy, his health, and they're pretty cheap to use. Later on in the game being like 20 groschen when I have 50,000. So that said, I did find it hilarious overall how NPCs would react to your cleanliness if it was an issue, but very easy to resolve. You just go to a bathhouse, 30 seconds later, every single stat of Henry's has been reset. So I really wish that maybe they tailored this back a little bit or balanced it more, so I had to engage a bit more, carry around food and stay healthy. But yeah, almost sometimes I didn't want to bathe because the vulgar over-the-top comments that some of the NPCs would make about how bad a place smells if you were in it really kind of adds to this weird charm of the world. But yeah, overall the survival never really felt tedious. It's never really meaningfully impacting gameplay for the most part, in my opinion. Honestly, that was a little bit of a pleasant surprise. But again, I want full immersion. I want full immersion, and this game does an excellent job with it, but just take it to the next level. That's what I really want. And a couple more gameplay systems to talk about. There's just so many aspects and avenues that one can discuss in this game. I just really want to hit a little bit everything on the head. So this one's all about quest design and the flexibility of the world and how you play in the world. And I really appreciated how flexible the quests are here. Sometimes the path of least resistance isn't the best, and sometimes investing more time doesn't give you the best reward. I feel like that variability overall made the world feel very reactive and alive, and just you as a person in it. Not really the main character of a quest, but just you're here and you're existing. A really great example is sometimes when you're traveling around, you're going to come across bandits accosting people, attacking, hurting people, robbing from them. And so, as you get into your groove of the game, you're going to start thinking, okay, well, I'm a knight in shining armor. I'm going to help these people out. And I had this really funny experience where there was a guy and a bandit was accosting him. And so then I fought the bandit and I killed the bandit. And the dude was pissed off at me. And he was like, well, why did you do that? I've taken care of it on my own. And I actually lost reputation and got a whole scolding from this old man. And I just thought that was so hilarious because it doesn't really fit the mold of what exactly you would expect the developers would want you to do. It's not always going to lend into this positive, negative outcome. And sometimes you'll make decisions where they don't help you out. And so I really did respect that there was a lot of flexibility in how that played. I think something this game does really good, and a competent RPG should always do really good, is that its side quests are very quality. They feel just as important as the main missions, and sometimes they even affect your options available in the main story. And so I really did like that a lot. That's rare in RPGs, and again, it makes the world feel interconnected in a way that's genuinely rewarding, because yes, the world is here, your story and your narrative is here, but they're really coming together to create a cohesive worldview, which I really respect. It takes a lot of effort to get that right, and they really did here in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And something else I often find to be a little trifling, depends on the game, is, oh wow, we're playing this RPG, I got all of these skills, I got all these stats, I got all these like little things on a sheet that tell me about how I'm doing building up my character. But oftentimes they don't have an impact on quests. They don't have an impact on things going on. But that's not the case here. Whether it's unarmed combat or forging, survival, alchemy, they're really woven well into the quests. And something I thought was really cool is how much it makes Henry feel like a real person with a diverse skill set, not just a dude swinging a sword. One of my favorite examples is a couple of times throughout the course of the game, Henry will get the opportunity to play as Dr. House, essentially. And there's a sick patient or someone you need to talk to, but they're knocked out. And you have to, through survival skills, understand like how exactly they're wounded, what are they dealing with, and take all of that knowledge and sometimes what you know about alchemy and put it together to create a new potion or solve and bandage their wounds in the appropriate way. You know, clean it, then bandage it, not bandage it, then clean it. Obviously that doesn't make any sense. And I just really liked that some of those options became available because of the skill checks and the skills you had built up throughout the course of the game. But more of the functional skills that you're going to be using in the everyday moments of playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, whether that's, again, fighting, like swords or warfare, etc., lockpicking, speech, I think a lot of them do become trivial a bit early on for me. Could be that my Henry just got overpowered, but before I left the first region, I had completed every main quest, every side quest. I thought we weren't going to come back here. So many of my skills were already hitting the max 30 level or so. And that's only halfway through the game. So once I got there, kind of none of the skill checks that I was then interacting with for those skills specifically felt meaningful anymore. So I was a little disappointed. And a good example is, again, when you start the game initially, one of the things you learn about speech checks, for example, is that speech is very important, but it's contextual in the sense of if you are in my town outfit, where I've got all these fancy frilly things on, and I'm trying to intimidate someone, well, it's much harder to intimidate them through speech because I am not fully kitted out in a suit of armor. And I thought when the game started that we were going to get more of that through the speech, but later on I realized that the fancy armor that you can get affects your speech just as much as like the fancy town outfits. And so as a result, speech kind of becomes null and void across the board because there is no contextual basis needed anymore. Henry looks sexy, he's badass and scary at the same time, so he really can't be defeated in the speech world, and it really kind of pushes many of the encounters to being not so fun with these skill check systems. See, that's a lot overall in the gameplay world. I think what I really want to say is that I had a blast with this game. It takes somebody 200 plus hours to come up with this laundry list of things where it's like, this was really great, but I would have liked if they did XYZ just a little bit more. And that's kind of where I'm at with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Gameplay systems are fantastic. There's so many different avenues and ways in which you can explore them, work within them, resolve missions or help people within them. And I really did like the flexibility there. And I just kind of found ways to pick apart the game because I played it so much. But I think we talked about gameplay quite a bit, didn't we? Let's just go through and discuss some of the story beats and some of the things I liked and disliked about the narrative. So the story continues, following Henry's journey in a way that I think is both personal and historically well-grounded. You're dealing with political upheaval, shifting alliances, kind of this slow burn introduction of the game's major villains, and the pacing of their reveal I think is very excellent. You know, by the time they step into the spotlight and show you who they truly are, you're emotionally invested and eager to kind of push forward in the story, and I really did like that a lot about the game. The narrative not only shows these personal sides of Henry and his life and what he's going through, but the narrative explores some really cool technological and cultural advancements of the period as well. I think this is something I've seen historical games rarely attempt, but I thought was super cool. You know, seeing historical innovation represented in a medium like this gives the story a unique flavor that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And these advancements do play some part in the game's overall narrative development in a couple of key ways, but I would have liked to have seen more. For example, gunpowder is one of these technological advancements that comes into scope over Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And you get a couple of like rudimentary gunpowder weapons to play around with, but it never comes to anything more than that. In fact, after I got the first gunpowder weapon in the game, I didn't equip it in that moment, and so I actually totally forgot it existed for like the next 30 hours. So I thought maybe a little more integration there would have been cool, but KCD2 makes its world feel genuinely lived in and grounded and believable to the medieval era and its logic, from the ways the towns operate to how NPCs kind of just follow their daily routines and they don't really revolve around you. Environments are richly detailed and reactive, with forests, villages, and soundscapes that feel physically authentic rather than as if you're playing a game itself. And many of those little systems that I mentioned, the alchemy, the maintenance, the reputation building and collapsing of, really reinforce the sense of inhabiting a real person with real needs instead of a typical RPG protagonist. For me, all this creates a level of immersion that really felt less like playing a game and more like slipping into a second life in medieval Bohemia. And I think it's really hard for any game to accomplish that, especially one of this scope. So I was really impressed that it was able to pull me in so deeply. Henry's progression in this game feels particularly compelling, not just because he's the main character, but because the story pushes him into situations that naturally demand growth of him, not just emotionally, but also socially and mechanically. The game does a really good job of reminding you and respecting who he was in the first title, and letting those relationships, his reputation, and the past events really shape how people treat him and also how he sees himself. And the supporting characters continue to evolve alongside him, creating the sense of a living world where everyone is changing, not just its protagonist. All of this makes Henry's arc feel earned, grounded, and deeply tied to the world around him. And the story that's taking place around him is very interesting, and I had a lot of fun journeying through it. But I thought the funniest thing is that Henry and his and the cast of supporting characters don't even end up being the most interesting person to me in the game. My favorite guy in the game is actually a totally random encounter that you can find by the name of Zach. So he pops up in multiple locations throughout the game, usually in some kind of misfortune, whether he's injured or robbed or stranded or otherwise kind of down on his luck. And every time you meet him, he has some crazy new story about how his fate has wronged him yet again, and he's the most unlucky dude to have ever lived. In a lot of ways, he's like basically KCD2's running gag NPC, and surprisingly memorable because of how committed he is to the bit. And it's just funny to see the major and little ways the world and its characters grow. And Zach is just a totally random guy you could never run into and have met when playing the title. So I love those little things about how this world tells its story and to who. You know, you never know if you're the one who's exclusively going to experience that moment because you were just there. So I really did like that about the title. KCD2 explores a number of themes in interesting ways. Big ones being like loyalty, justice, particularly social hierarchy. And these are done in ways that feel inseparable from the world itself. Your place and who Henry is really do matter in society. You have nobles, you have commoners, outlaws. I mean, all these people treat Henry differently depending upon his reputation and his appearance, past actions, and kind of reinforce the rigid class structure of medieval Bohemia. It doesn't matter how many people Henry has saved, who he's talked to and met, what he's done. The fact alone that Henry is not a noble means that he does not have some of the privileges that you'll experience throughout the title. And I just always thought that was an interesting reminder of who he was in the overall kind of zeitgeist of its world. Acts of kindness in this world and its cruelties don't really just disappear into a morality meter. They really echo through the world as NPCs remember what you've done. Gossip spreads and opportunities may open or close based on how you've carried yourself throughout the title. So the game's realism isn't just mechanical, it's moral, it's social, it's It's grounded in every choice of believable human reaction and making the consequences feel more personal rather than scripted through this. So I really thought through this, the game's themes of and messaging of title are incredibly prevalent and super interesting. The story itself is mostly linear, but supported by a massive open world full of side quests. The first half of the game is paced beautifully, but the second half becomes more sprawling, and I think that's to its disadvantage. A really big problem when you enter Kuttenberg is that almost every single side mission is automatically available when you enter the region, and so it's really easy to get lost in these gameplay heavy stretches before returning to the main narrative where you're just grinding it out, doing these side quests and running around the world. So I'm not necessarily a fan of this style of pacing in the open world games, and found it much more noticeable in the second half just because of its size. I would have much more preferred if these side quests became opened up to you as a player as you made more progression in the main missions, because that I think would have balanced a lot more out in terms of how you interact with the different ways in which you can play the narratives that are built into KCD2. And I think it would have done a really good benefit to the game's pacing if this was the case. But still, I think the game does a really good job of letting you solve missions in ways that suit your skills, whether that's sneaking around or speaking to people or fighting them or doing some alchemy or searching around for thistles in the forest. Or even, applying unarmed combat, some of the ways that you handle situations. I really appreciate it, and I commented on a little bit earlier, but the moral weight of your decisions being often felt by the people around you and how you decide to do things, which adds emotional depth to the decisions you're making as you're playing the game. A great example of this is how you handle an early tavern dispute between two different groups of characters. And that dispute itself is going to impact the way in which you interact with some of those characters later in the story. Or another great one is when you have to do some choosing of the best quality craftsmanship between two blacksmiths. And actually, if you make a bad decision here, it's going to kind of perma-lock you out of a follow-up quest. So I thought that was interesting. So I like the way in which different interpretations could lead a person down different permanent paths when playing this game. And again, it's just something that this RPG game does a notch above the best of them, and creates just a fantastic experience for the player. Yeah, what can I say? I really did like the story. I liked the quests. I liked the writing, the dialogue. It's just all so good to engage with and will really bring you into the world. There were never times when I experienced one of those things and thought, this is taking the immersion out for me. I'm just not really into playing this game at the moment. I was always into playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and that's why it ate so much of my life away, and I really did have a lot of fun with it. All right, a few miscellaneous things I want to talk about. I want to discuss the voice acting, because the voice acting is consistently strong in this game, with performances that feel authentic to the setting and the time. We get some really great characters here that sound grounded and not necessarily theatrical, which is something you would expect. So I really did like that they ended up fitting the tone perfectly. The real stars here are Tom McKay and Luke Dale, quite literally, especially when they're mixing their conversation together as Henry and Sir Hans. They're constantly charming and funny, and just really had me engaged in their characters. There was also a lot of nuance and depth in their characters, not only the way in which they express things, but the things they'll go through and how their voice actors kind of interact with all of that. And so I really did think they did a really great job there. And many of these qualities are things that I found to be true of, especially a standout person, Father Godwin's a new voice actor who stepped into the role and really expanded its role through deeper pools of emotional complexity to deliver on. Did a really great job as Father Godwin across the board. So yeah, I think that the voice acting is just phenomenal in this game. They really did a great job of pulling players into the historical world of KCD2 and grounding those players along the way. Sound effects too do a lot of heavy lifting to drive the immersion. I played this game in a surround sound system and just felt truly integrated into the world. Little things like the clanking armor when you're wearing it, or the creaking wood when you're walking through the forest, bustling towns, the environmental ambience overall just makes the world feel tactile and lived in. The audio doesn't just decorate the senses and the atmosphere, but it really communicates information like how much the weight of the gear that you have on changes your movement, or how distant activity hints at what's beyond your line of sight through the audio cues that you're getting. So even these small cues, like an echo of footsteps in a stone corridor or the rustle of wildlife in the forest, reinforce this sense of place in a way visuals alone can't. There was one element that began to just drive me crazy across the game, and if you've played this game, I really need to know if it's just me or if it's what they decided to do with it, but Mutt. I like the dog. I like to feed him and pet his head and get his help sometimes fighting enemies. But man, if this dog found something and started barking, he would not stop unless you paid attention to him via issuing a command to heal or running over there and petting his head. And the bark was so frequent and so loud at times that it breaks the otherwise grounded soundscape. So if you've played the game, I'm sure you know what I mean, but I just thought it was a little ridiculous, and I wanted to honestly just tell Mutt, like, just go away, go back to the wolf cave that you were living in, because you're driving me crazy, dude. But he is actually very helpful in combat. So you end up having really great voice acting paired with really great environmental sound effects, all draped over with a fantastic soundtrack that's atmospheric and period appropriate, which really ends up enhancing the exploration and the story moments without overwhelming them. The scope overall leans very heavily on authentic medieval instrumentation, which gives simple travel sequences a sense of place and historical texture. What really stood out to me the most is how dynamically the music shifts. There's swelling of subtlety during tense encounters, it's kind of softening during the quiet village life, and letting silence take over when the world needs itself to breathe. It really creates an audio landscape that feels carefully tuned towards the player's journey. And so whoever was coming up with the logic for how some of these songs integrate into what you're doing, I really respect the work they did, because they did a fantastic job with it. And finally, I wanted to discuss how, and I'm sure you've seen watching some of the gameplay, how visually stunning this game is. Sweeping vistas, rolling countryside, and detailed towns that create a world that feels real and lived in. But it's the way these environments are composed that make them so memorable. Every horizon line, forest path, and village square just feels so intentionally crafted rather than procedurally assembled. Lighting and weather systems are cool. They do a huge amount of work too, kind of transforming familiar locations depending on time of day or season, and give the world a natural sense of rhythm that makes you feel like you're living in it. I was constantly impressed by how much the visuals did for me, especially the landscapes alone being just absolutely breathtaking, not just for their beauty, but for how effectively they pull you into the physicality and mood of medieval Bohemia. Now that said, there were a few odd oversights. One of those that I thought was really weird was in the game, you're going to be having a torch in your hand a lot because you were going to be traveling around at night, and this game very much naturally shows what a dark night looks like, so you need a torch to get around. Well, if you have the torch and then you see your shadow, they didn't actually create a shadow for the torch, which I thought was a really weird kind of visual thing to miss out on, being as you were going to have one in your hand. And it was just one of those little things, doesn't affect the game, but that I saw and I was like, oh, that's odd. Odd reminder that I'm playing a game. You'll also occasionally see just little things that are always going to happen in games of this scope and scale. I saw NPCs, snapping between animations or getting stuck on geometry or T-posing out in the woods. It happens sometimes. It's just, again, a reminder that the game's ambitions sometimes outpace its polish. But they honestly weren't that frequent, and outside of some of those random little glitches, the game generally performs incredibly well, and most of the rough edges are more distracting than they are groundbreaking. And again, they're very infrequent. There's things that I just kind of picked up along the way and I thought, oh, that's a little strange. And to be even more honest, some of these little glitches really make an open world game for me. It's this subtle expression of love's limits. The developers put so much time into getting so much out of the title working right that these little things that find their way in, or these little funny glitches, they're just something that all great open world RPGs have. And so they're not too concerning for me, because they're just an expression of, we've done so much, here's our limit. We really pushed it, because Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is not one of those games where you can immediately identify that there was a lack of appreciation for what the developers were working on. It's very clear that it has a high standard of quality, and so anything that missed, well, maybe not intentionally, but does make for a very fun and funny experience. I honestly feel like I could talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 forever. It's an immersive game that genuinely feels like having lived a second life. Again, the world is beautiful, the story is compelling, and many of its systems, especially the alchemy and the quest design, are incredibly satisfying. I thought overall, it was very odd how much the combat was a major step backward for me and was plagued by so many technical issues and balance problems that make early and mid-game encounters frustrating. And to top that off, navigation can be a little clunky. Some of the systems lose their depth over the course of the title, and pacing in the second half does become a little uneven for me personally. But still, I think the emotional investment, the historical authenticity, and the sheer atmosphere of the game makes it one of the most memorable experiences I've had in a long time. When Kingdom Come 2 hits its stride, it's unlike anything else in the genre, and even with its flaws, it's a world I was happy to get lost in. I'm so excited that this game finally came out. Some of the hints towards the end, it does appear like we're gonna get a third Kingdom Come game, and I hope that through some of my feedback, Warhorse Studios can continue on looking at some of these little systems, improving them, improving the balance, improving the pace, so we can get an even better version of what might be out there for this studio and for its amazing franchise. It's an incredible franchise that I'm surprised nobody else has really tried to do a title in. I feel like Warhorse Studios is just really owning this genre and this style of RPG. And so all my hope goes out to them that they continue to do that. I had such a fun time with this game, and I really think you should play it too. Now, if you have played KCD2, really curious what you thought about my thoughts on the title. If there's anything I missed, if there's things that really stood out to you or that you appreciated about the game or disliked, please let me know in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Would love to have you along for the journey as weekly I attempt to beat and review games. This review took a little longer, as you can see, if you've been watching my content, but I'm really excited to be back and sharing some of the gaming experiences I've been having recently. Well, until next time, friends, stay well, stay healthy. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, peace.